This video, I just wanted to talk about my own story with chronic pain. And this is not a video about trying to give you solutions or anything like that. It's just my own journey. And so take what you want from it. Now, years ago when I was in my 20s, I felt like I was pushing 80. I had sciatica, I had this intense lower back, hip, buttock, and both leg pain. I had radiculopathy in my shoulder, in my upper spine and neck, and that gave me a frozen neck and pins and needles down my arm. And over several months, I was becoming so fatigued. I was unable to sleep, and so I didn't feel good during the day. That my mood and my memory was becoming really low, and I was starting to become depressed again. I had suffered from depression for years before this and had been hospitalized for suicidal depression before. And so it kind of made me afraid that, oh man, am I going back to that place? And month after month of just widespread muscle pain from the two conditions I just mentioned and tenderness had turned into this sort of global fibromyalgia, um, which really no doctor could help me with, unfortunately. And even worse, nobody really seemed to understand what I was going through. A lot of people had heard about chronic pain, most of them medical professionals, but they didn't really believe me, especially about the fibromyalgia. Sciatica seemed like a real condition that they could pinpoint and say, okay, you slipped a disc here. But I remember walking with a cane, even hobbling down the street and just grimacing in pain. And when my own mother even said, "Oh, come on, you're not disabled. You're fine. It's all in your head." And and so this was even more hurtful. The social component to it, the feeling of isolation that I felt, and because it made me really question my own sanity. It made me question my own judgment and perception of things. I was in so much pain for so long, but nobody else could feel it or even understand it, to the point they didn't even believe it. So on top of that, I felt afraid to ask anybody for help, because it was like, well, why ask somebody for help if they first of all can't help you, and second of all don't even believe you. They especially can't help you in that case. It seemed like nobody could help me. Regular physical therapy, which I had been going to, I'd been doing all the at-home exercises. That kind of did nothing really. I got an MRI, which cost me $900 after insurance. I was on multiple pain meds, so I was going to CVS fairly regularly. Um, and so as a result, I was smoking a lot of cannabis. I was drinking kratom powder and kava root, which would give me, a couple hours of relief and sort of vacation from the nightmare. It was like I just wanted 2 hours of sanity, of just a break from the nonstop, incessant, agonizing pain. And so I would get that from the cannabis, the kratom, and the kava. But then the pain was just back as bad or just as bad as it was before. So I stopped asking anybody for help at that point. I kind of threw up my arms and I thought anybody who would try to help me either couldn't, or they would just gaslight me, like I was talking about before. Even the people closest to me, they're kind of getting compassion fatigue. They just couldn't really care or really wanted to hear about it anymore. They were just sort of tired. Even my own therapist, whose sympathy I was paying for, was getting tired of it. And so I felt very trapped, like a rat in a cage at this point. I felt powerless to improve my condition, and therefore helpless and hopeless. And that's where depression starts to enter, that apathy. And I was also coming to terms with the potential lifelong loss of my body. It really seemed not unrealistic to say that I wouldn't be able to use my body like I was before. I couldn't even unload the dishwasher or take out the trash. It just put me in this spiral of intense grief, which felt like it was overlapping with depression. I was grieving the loss of my body of being able to do what I normally could do. It was like being paralyzed. I used to go hiking. I used to go swimming in the lake and skiing in the wintertime, and none of that I could do anymore. And on top of that, my condition wasn't staying the same. It was actually getting worse. Um, so most injuries, they heal within weeks or months, but beyond that window, I learned later, the original pain signal kind of becomes a learned response. And the brain and the nervous system, that part of the brain that activates the learned response, is also connected to fear, memory, and the emotions. It's deeper in the brain. And so once you start to learn this, the pain signal becomes activated. And it's not just activated by physical activity triggers, which certainly would happen. I would get up from my chair and I would learn that trigger. And so it wasn't just fear of a certain emotion, but it was a fear of psychosocial situations, like a stressful situation or a challenging emotion. So when I would start to feel stressed, that would give me a flare. A door would slam down the hall. I was living in an apartment at the time, and my muscles would seize up in pain, and an ambulance would go by outside, and just the sound of it would tense me up. And all the muscles wrapped around my nerves would just, you know, kind of grip the spine, and I would feel all this pain all over again. And I kept learning this, and I would just collapse, like sobbing, literally sobbing in pain on the floor like a helpless child. And this is just a couple minute explanation of my story, but this lasted a long time. And so I was just so fed up. I couldn't take one more trip to CVS. Like literally, I couldn't even make the 5 block walk down to CVS. I was grieving. I was desperate. It felt like if I didn't do something now, like it was really urgent and something had to change. Just had to. And totally. And nothing outside, I was realizing, could do that for me. What had to change was me. I had to do something, and I had to do something different. Recently I heard a quote, probably on social media or something like that, people change when they hurt enough that they have to. They learn enough that they want to. They see enough that they're inspired to, and they receive enough that they're able to. It's a good quote. So I was certainly hurting enough that I had to. Um, I had broken down in public. I had been to the hospital. I couldn't walk. I was just in excruciating, unrelenting pain, and that was an impetus for change. And from daily experience, I had learned that I could no longer avoid it. I couldn't run from it, and nobody else, no doctor, no shrink, could help me but me. Only I had the answers. Cheesy as it sounds, it was me that had to change how I related to and responded to my own pain. You may or may not be in a similar situation. Again, this is just my story. You might think this was depressing, but this was actually a relief in my journey, my healing journey. It was actually really empowering. I was like, oh, wait, none of these fuckers can help me out. I gotta do this, and it was kind of like empowering. That I had been learning a response. When I would get up, I would learn that it hurt, or when a door would slam, I would learn that was scary or a pain signal. I had also been training myself and learning to depend on other people, to depend on specialists, to depend on doctors and physical therapists and massage people and whatever. But in getting back to this quote, I had also seen enough that I was inspired to finally do something different. If insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, well, then I was trying to reclaim my sanity by doing something different, radically different. I tried modern medicine over and over, got my prescriptions refilled after week, and appealed to other people to fix me, kind of like a broken down car. Now I was like, I'm not going to follow false prophets to the light. I have to leave myself out of my own darkness. But what had I received? Well, here's where the story gets kind of crazy, because had you told me that I was about to, what I was about to receive, I never in a million years would have believed you. Since since my late teens, I had been taking LSD and MDMA fairly regularly, mostly socially, recreationally, and they would occasionally awaken me to new vistas, to new insights, to new perspectives, and it really felt like a psychological reboot. So I was very well versed in LSD. But at that point, I really wasn't cool enough to score any, at least like, when I needed it, or when I felt like I wanted it. And so I started looking for alternatives, and what I found were morning glory seeds. Now, when used in a ceremonial context, morning glory is a visionary plant with a lot of shamanic power, historically speaking. The Aztecs used it to open divine portals and communicate with the gods. Mesoamerican cultures like the Maya, the Zapotec, they considered these seeds, which they called Ololiqui sometimes, to be very sacred. And with them, they communed with the dead. They predicted future events. They found lost items. They healed injuries. They coped with trauma. And then after the Spanish conquistadors banned that ritual use, as they did with many other medicines, and centuries later, the DEA followed suit in the United States, the view of the seeds' magical powers to heal and to be used shamanically had been supplanted by fear and amnesia. If you get morning glory seeds, it's late in any like hardware store or gardening store. It just says poison on the back of the label. Um, but like I said, I was done listening to other people, so I started microdosing, mini dosing, mesodosing, macrodosing, and heroically dosing these things. Um, and I'll spare you the shamanic initiation, and that's a good story that I could spend days talking about. But these plants really had the ability to help me feel emotions that I had not been feeling, and to really tap into my heart and my character, and to heal my mind and to understand my thoughts. Because when you change your thinking, you change your beliefs. When you change your beliefs, you change your expectations. When you change your expectations, you change your attitude. When you change your attitude, you change your behavior. When you change your behavior, you change your performance. When you change your performance, you change your life. And I was able to go through this process of thinking, believing, expectations, attitudes emotionally, and seeing how connected my chronic pain and my depression and my addictions to alcohol and cannabis and things like that, and my panic attacks were all emotional, all of them. I really think that the Western medical model, for all its merits, totally misses the boat with regards to subconscious and emotional roots to chronic conditions. And chronic conditions are about 70 to 80% of what ails the current medical system, and about 90% of the costs in all of the things that I mentioned, whether you're buying a cane or a wheelchair, or prescription medications, or seeing a GP, or getting physical therapy. All that stuff costs a lot of money, time, energy, effort, and it's not healing the emotions that underlie, that are the root of the condition. And so the condition comes back, if you numb it out with gabapentin or something like that, or narcotics, and then you still have the emotions, you still have the physical memory of it, the learned pain responses as well, and also you're learning a response to depend on prescription medications, and training yourself to be dependent on a system. Really, what this led me to was working with Mushrooms brought me to ayahuasca. Ayahuasca brought me to San Pedro, a mescaline containing cactus. And I really was able to feel how I needed to feel, to go through a very intense process of transformation. I'm not the person I was before. I'm a very different person. I'm more me than I was, which is a beautiful thing, right? It's definitely got that caterpillar to butterfly type thing. If you have a chronic disease or a chronic illness or chronic pain, I know what that's like. I've dealt with that both psychologically, emotionally, and physically and spiritually. And and what I would say is that I don't know you, and so your history and your background and the reasons for your pain or your illness are very unique to you and your story, your childhood traumas, your genetics, and I don't know what your environment is like. I have nothing. I have nothing to say for you except that emotions really do affect our illness. And until we can actually tap into our emotions, really feel how we need to feel, and I'm not just talking uh, an hour on the couch, with a therapist. I'm talking truly, deeply feel how we need to feel on a cellular level. That condition will continue, will last, and conditions that have taken years to develop can sometimes take many more than days or weeks to unlearn and replace with healthy beliefs, expectations, attitudes, habits, things that I mentioned. Um, and so, what I do now is I help people with chronic diseases and chronic illnesses. And so, I would just like you to consider, I would suggest that you consider looking at more emotional treatments, such as plant medicines or holistic therapies that can help you get to the root of the root. It's not pleasant. I'm not saying that this is, a walk in the park. In fact, in some ways it's much more difficult and harrowing than the actual condition itself. And the whole cliche, like the only way out is through, is really true with plant medicine. But anyway, I just wanted to share my story for anybody who's going through stuff like that. And yeah, wish you luck. And if you need any help, feel free to reach out. I'm here. I help people with stuff like this. I'm not saying that I'm your solution. You're your solution, just as I was my own solution. But there are things that can help you along the way, just like a walking stick can help you up the mountain. So anyway, there is hope. There is possibility. Um, it's challenging, I know, and I'm sorry that you're going through what you're going through. I really do feel for you, and but I also feel like there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that's you, and whether you want it and are willing to do it, that's also you. So best of luck, guys, and much love to you.